Mighty companions, welcome to the way of mastery. Welcome to the way of mastery on Facebook Live. Welcome to the way of mastery. I am Earl Purdy, and I'm here to join my mighty companions. We are coming together to remember who we are, to get past the programming that we've gotten since we were born that keeps us from remembering who we really are, the powerful beings who we really are. We're going to talk about the one cause of all fear, all pain, all problems in any way. We're going to talk about the one cause of all fear, all problems in any form. We're going to talk about the source of all illusion. In the way of mastery, on page 230, in the way of mastery, the source of all illusion. That's the same as saying the source of all fears. What is the cause of all fears? We're going to talk about what is the cause of every single seeming problem that we have in our life, every seeming problem that we think we see in the world. We're going to talk about that tonight in this presentation. Welcome to the way of mastery. I am Earl Purdy, and I'm welcoming all of you, my mighty companions. We're on page 230 in part 2, the way of transformation, in the way of mastery, the source of all illusion. On page 230, part 2, the way of transformation, we're talking about the source of all illusion. I'm excited to be with you as I look at what's going on. I think it's so important that we come together the way that we come together. I want you to know that our purpose is to hear the instructions that are coming from the invisible side of things, that our invisible guides are trying to tell us in order to get past any blocks. And this section is called the source of all illusion. Now, in order to benefit, this is what I want you to remember. If you really want to hear this correctly, this is very important. Listen to me now. You need not believe the ideas. You need not accept the ideas. You need not even welcome the ideas. Listen. Some of the ideas you will find hard to believe. Some of the ideas may seem quite startling. You are not asked to judge and analyze the ideas at all. It is the use of the ideas that will give the ideas meaning to you and will show you that the ideas are true. It's the use of the ideas that will give the ideas meaning to you and will show you that the ideas are true. So I'm going to start with this section, the source of all illusions. Don't forget to like my Earl Purdy page that you're watching this on. Don't forget to follow the Earl Purdy page, because that will allow you to be notified every time I go live. I also want to ask you to share this video on your timeline. Right next to share, right next to comments, just click on share and then share this video. So we're going to take it slow. It says illusions can seem to take many forms. Yet all illusions, which are all fears, illusion is just another name for false ideas. Illusion is another name for fears. Illusion is another name for appearances. But we are especially looking at illusions as fear. So fears can seem to take many forms. Illusions can seem to take many forms. Yet every fear, every illusion, every pain, every false idea has one cause. Every false idea has one cause. And what is the one cause of every illusion? What is the one cause of every fear, every upset that a person seems to go through? What is the one cause of every problem that we see in the world? The Way of Mastery says it's a decision to perceive oneself as separate from God. It's a decision to see yourself as separate from God. The one cause of every problem is the decision to see oneself as separate from God. 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 I want you to take a moment and just say the word God. And depending on your belief system, depending on what you learned as a child or what you experienced, when you say God, it's either going to make you feel a little bit uncomfortable or it's going to give you a sense of comfort. But God is the creator. God is all that is. God is source. And so if there's any kind of fear, if there's any kind of problem, the Way of Mastery says illusions can seem to take many forms, but they all have one source, one cause. Deciding. And notice it said deciding to see yourself as separate from God. The Way of Mastery is saying it's a choice. It's a choice to decide to see yourself as separate from love. God is love. God is love. God is love. God is your creator. You did not create yourself. Say that to yourself. I did not create myself. I did not create myself. I did not create myself. Take a breath and say that to yourself. I did not create myself. I didn't create myself. I did not create myself. I did not create myself. You did not create yourself. You didn't do it. You are not your own creation. You are not your own creation. You didn't create yourself. And your mother, your physical mother and father did not create you either. Your mother did not create you. Your father did not create you. Two beings having sex did not create you. You did not create your children. You did not create your children. You did not create yourself. Your parents did not create you. God created you. Your Creator created you. And the best way to separate yourself from God, if you want to know the best way to separate yourself from love, if you want to know the best way to separate yourself from freedom, if you want to know the best way to separate yourself from a really good time, you just convince yourself. The best way to do that is to convince yourself that because you are separate from God, there must be many things about you and your life that are out of alignment with the will of God. So how do you convince yourself that you're separate from love? By thinking that there's a lot of things about your life and that there's a lot of things about you that are out of alignment with the will of God. In other words, you will manifest many variations that seem to express the instability that is the effect of that one belief, that one perception. Right now in your life, if you're trying to convince yourself that you're separate from God, if you're trying to convince yourself that you're separate from love, then you have manifested many variations that seem to express a lot of instability in your life. If a person is trying to convince themselves that they're separate from God, if a person is trying to convince themselves that they're separate from their source, they will see a lot of instability in their lives. They will see lots of instability around them. But that instability will be coming from one belief. All instability in your life, no matter where you see the instability, it could be you see instability in your relationship. It may be you feel instability in your financial situation. It could be that you feel instability in your spiritual situation. It could seem like there's instability in your job, in the world, in your health. All of those things are just the effect of one belief, one perception, which is, I am separate from God. I have accomplished the impossible. What is the impossible? Being separate from God. The way of master is saying we think we have accomplished something that's impossible. And what is it that's impossible? It is impossible that you be separate from God. It is impossible that you be separate from love. So, every instability, every problem, every variation is coming from one belief, one perception. I am separate from God. I have accomplished the impossible. Let me keep it in place. I am separate from God. I have accomplished the impossible. Let me keep the separation from God in place. So when I read something like this, the first thing that goes through my mind is, there's a part of me that believes that when I have a problem, it's being caused by some type of external situation. Like if there's a money problem, then there's a part of the mind that says it's based on something that's happening in the economy. If I have a relationship problem, I think it's because maybe I'm in a relationship with somebody that really doesn't love me or appreciate me. Or if I'm on a job I don't like, it's because I'm not educated in some way, or maybe I didn't get the training that I needed in some way. In other words, the part of you that doesn't know the truth, the part of me that doesn't know the truth, it doesn't realize that every variation, every problem, every illusion is actually coming from a belief that's hidden. And that hidden belief is, I am separate from God. I have accomplished the impossible. Let me keep it in place. So what is the one? What are the three sentences that keep all pain going? What's the three sentences that keep all pain going? I am separate from God. I have accomplished the impossible, which is to be separate from God. Let me keep it in place. Keep what in place? My separation from God, my separation from love. So illusions, which are false ideas, which are fears, then while the form of illusions may seem to be many, all illusions, all fears are really one illusion, one belief, one perception, and one fear. Now let me explain something a little bit. The ego is the part of us that thinks it's separate from God. So the ego is the part of the mind that believes it's separate from love. The ego is the part of the mind that believes it's separate. Another way you could put it is, the ego is the part of the mind that believes that you are a body. The ego is the part of the mind that believes that you are separate. The ego is the part of the mind, the part of you that believes you are separate, the part of you that believes you are different, the part of you that believes you are a body, the part of you that believes that you are a woman, the part of you that believes you are a woman, the part of you that believes you are a man, the part of you that believes you are a man, the part of you that believes you are a personality, the part of you that believes you are a race, the part of you that believes you are a gender, the part of you that believes you are separate from everything and everybody. That is the ego. The part of you that believes that you have fear, the part of you that believes you are afraid, the part of you that believes that you are guilty or angry or sick or mortal or separate, that is the ego. So the ego is the idea that I'm separate from God. The ego is the idea that I'm separate from you. It's your ego that thinks you're talking to a separate person named Earl Purdy. It is your ego that tells you there's an Earl Purdy over here and a you over there, and that there are all these other people online that are separate and that are apart from you. That is the ego. And the ego is the idea, I am separate from God. I have accomplished the impossible, which is to be separate from God. So let me keep that part in place. Okay. I'm going slow, and I'm purposely going slow. I'm purposely going slow because all of these wisdom texts basically say, if you really take the time to study them, they say, take it slow, hear what it's saying. Give yourself a moment to contemplate and be with what it's saying. The ego, the one illusion, the ego is the part of a person that doesn't like to listen. It's the part of the person that doesn't know how to be quiet and allow itself to take the truth in. The ego is the part of the person that wants to constantly analyze every single thing that it hears. The ego part of the mind, the part of the mind that believes it's separate from God, is the part of the mind that asks endless questions, but it can never perceive meaningful answers. So every time you answer a question that the ego asks, the ego doesn't get the answer, and it just follows up with another question. The ego can never perceive meaningful answers. It's the part of the mind that only questions, but it's not the part of the mind that's willing to listen and hear the answer that will heal everything. So, it says right here, illusions then, while on page 231, third paragraph, it says, illusions then, fears then, while the form of them may seem to be many, are really one. Which means healing occurs. Okay, now now check this out. You're about to be told how healing occurs. You're about to be told how to heal all your fears, all your illusions. It's about to say it to you right now. Healing occurs when in the depth of the mind, the decision is made to surrender. So you will be and so the Way of Mastery and A Course in Miracles both teach that to heal is to undo fear. That healing is undoing all fear in the mind. Healing is to undo all fear in the mind. To heal means to undo all separation in the mind. So the decision to surrender is the decision to heal. Your healing will not come from anything that you try to arrange or fix or make or invent outside yourself in the world. I'll say it again. True healing will not come from any of a person's ingenious ideas about how they're going to make themselves happy and arrange everything in the world and make everything in the world be just the way they want it to be. Healing comes from surrender. That's where healing comes from. Healing comes from surrender. And that means to give up. So what is surrendering? To give up the insane idea. So what is the most insane idea of all? That one's self could possibly exist apart from the mind of God. The most insane idea that a person can come up with is that they could even be alive and be separate and disconnected from God. It's ridiculous to think that a person could even be alive and be separate from God. You wouldn't even be alive if you were truly existing apart from God. You would not be alive in this very moment, communicating with each other, talking, listening to me. None of the things you would be doing right now could you do right now if you weren't alive. And that life that you have is God. God is the life that you have. You couldn't even exist if you were not being sustained by God in this very moment. You would not even be existing if you were not connected to God. It's ridiculous. That's right, Irene. It's ridiculous to think you are alive on your own. Like you are the one that's giving yourself life. Your life is God. Your life is God. Your life is God. That is your proof that God is. You exist. So, the Way of Mastery is saying, so to surrender would be me just giving up the idea that I'm existing separate from love. You could not exist separate from love. You cannot exist separate from love. You cannot exist separate from God. You do not exist separate from God. You do not exist apart from the mind of God. You can't exist apart from God. You cannot exist without God. You do not exist without God. So what does surrender mean? What does surrender mean? What does it mean to surrender? The ego mind hates the idea of surrendering. The idea of surrender does not appeal to a fear-based mind. A person that's full of fear, they fight surrender every way that they possibly can, because the Way of Mastery and the Course in Miracles both teach that the ego is the part of the mind that thinks it's on its own and that it has to just look out for itself and is self-sufficient and it's autonomous and it's the part of you that thinks it has to do everything yourself. If you're one of those people that think you've got to do everything and that if you didn't manage everything and that if you didn't control everything, then everything would go to pot, then you are very ego-based. You have forgotten temporarily, you've forgotten that you are connected to God. You've forgotten that you have a creator. You've forgotten that you have help with a capital H. So if you're one of these people that's always thinking you've got to do everything, And what it means to surrender is it means you're going to settle into the position of the servant. So to surrender means you're going to take on the position of the servant. Now, what does it mean to become a servant? He says, the conduit through which the mind of God and the love of God can be expressed. So if you're going to surrender, what you say to yourself is, I'm going to surrender to my Creator. I'm going to surrender to God. I'm willing to surrender to God. The way that I'm going to surrender to God is I'm going to now see myself as a servant. And in seeing myself as a servant, I'm going to see myself as the conduit through which the mind and the love of God can be expressed. I'm no longer seeking after power, money, fame, or physical pleasure as my primary goal. I am now going to surrender. Earl Purdy, for instance, I'll use myself as an example. Earl Purdy is going to surrender to God now. Earl Purdy is going to see himself as a conduit through which the mind of God and the love of God can be expressed to you. I want to be a conduit that God's love can come through to you. My position is I'm a servant, and as a servant, I want the mind of God and the love of God to be expressed through me to you. That's why I do these classes. That's why I do these broadcasts. That's why I do these videos, because I'm a servant. I surrender. I surrender. I surrender. I surrender. I'm not just out after money for money's sake, power and specialness for power and specialness' sake. I'm not trying to be famous. And it's not just about getting off and having physical pleasure anymore, even though all of those things are not guilty or bad or sinful. I'm at the point on my spiritual path that I am willing to surrender by becoming a conduit through which God's mind and God's love can come through my body, can come through me to you and everyone that I know and everyone in the world. That is what surrendering means. It means you're willing to be a conduit. You're willing to be a means that the universe uses to express love and healing to everyone. I'm taking it slow, and I know that for some people's egos, they already have tuned out and ready to turn off the whole thing. But that's okay. That's all right. I don't mind. I don't mind. I'm a messenger. And a messenger of God just delivers the message. And a messenger of God cannot have any concern about what happens after the message has been given or how people react to the message that's been given. And the message that's being given is that if you're watching this, it's time for you to surrender. It's time for you to surrender. You are an old soul. You're not a little child soul that's just looking for the next toy you get to play with. It's time for you to acknowledge another level of spiritual maturity now. And as you mature in spirit, you recognize that the only problem you got whenever you think you have a problem is that you think you're separate from God. You think you're separate from the Creator. That's the cause of all your problems, perceived problems. That's the cause of every fear you have, every guilt you have, any level of lack of peace, any level of discomfort, on any level in your life, in any kind of way. It's there because you believe you're separate from God. You believe you're separate from love. That is the one belief that is causing all instability in your life. That's the one belief that causes all upset in your life. And that belief is, I am separate from God. I have accomplished the impossible. Let me keep it in place. The Way of Mastery says on page 231, paragraph 2, that is the cause of every variation and every instability in anyone's life. It is not the economy. It is not whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. It's not because you're an American or not an American, or because of something that someone is doing to you, or something that they're saying to you, or something that's happening in your outside world. The one cause of every illusion, the one cause of every fear is, I am separate from God, which is love. I have accomplished the impossible. I think I'm actually separate from God, which is impossible. And there's a part of me that says, let me keep it in place. Let me keep the separation in place. So how do you get past it? You make another decision. What is the decision? What is the decision? The decision to surrender. To give up the insane idea that you could possibly even be alive if it wasn't for God. You wouldn't even be in existence if it was not for the Creator, Earl. If it wasn't for the Creator, mighty companions, you would not even be alive. I'm taking it slow, because if you walk away from this joining with just this one idea, you will save yourself hundreds and hundreds of years of suffering. Hundreds. The Course in Miracles says, every minute we spend together reminding each other of the truth, we save ourselves 100 years of studying and suffering and lessons. Because what I found out after teaching for 40 years is that the truth is simple. It's not complicated. The ego makes the truth complicated. If you need this to be complicated, you are in your ego. Your ego needs it to be complicated. It's not complicated. The way is not hard. The way is not hard. A spiritual path is not hard. Do you know that a spiritual path is just very different? You're doing something different. You're not doing anything hard. So now we're going to surrender. Now we're going to surrender. How do we surrender? We surrender by saying, I am ready to settle into the position of the servant. I am ready. Some of you out there, you are ready, so say it with me, those of you who want to. I am ready to settle into the position of the servant. I'm ready to settle into the position of the servant. I am ready to settle into the position of the servant. I am ready to settle into the position of the servant, the conduit through which the mind of God, the love of God can be expressed. I am willing to settle into the position of the into the position of the servant. I'm willing to be a servant. I am willing to be God's servant. I am willing to be the Creator's servant. I am willing to be the servant of love. I am willing to be the servant of love. I am willing to be love's servant. I am willing to be a servant of love. I am willing to be a servant of love. I am willing to be God's servant. I'm willing to be God's servant. I'm willing to be a conduit. I'm willing to be the conduit. I'm willing to be the conduit through which the mind of God, the love of God can be expressed. The mind that exists in perfect surrender sees absolutely no purpose to any moment of experience save this. I'm taking this stuff sentence by sentence. So what does it mean? How can you tell when you're in perfect surrender? That's a good question. How can a person tell when they're in perfect surrender? The way you can tell when you're in perfect surrender is the only purpose you see in any moment is to be a conduit of the mind and love of God. So I can tell that I've become a true servant because I'll see the purpose of every moment of my life as being a conduit for the mind and love of God to be expressed. How can you tell when you're not kidding around? How can you tell when you're really sincere about being a servant? How can you tell when you're really doing it? The way you can tell when you're really being a conduit, how can you tell? You can tell because you will see the purpose of every moment is for you to be a conduit. You'll believe that every moment on this planet, you're on this planet to be a conduit through which the love of God can be expressed to everything and everyone around you. That will be your only purpose, is to be a conduit for love to be expressed. That's how you know a person knows that they really surrendered. In case you want to know how you can tell when you really surrendered, the way you can tell if you really surrendered to God is that you will see the purpose of every single moment as you being a conduit so that God's mind and God's love can be expressed through you. That's how you will know when you have surrendered. If you have not surrendered if all you want is money. You have not surrendered if all you want is specialness. You have not surrendered if all you want is sex. You have not surrendered if all you want is physical pleasure. You have not surrendered if all you want is something outside of yourself that's temporary and doesn't last. You're innocent. You're beautiful. It's not a sin. It's not a crime. But you haven't surrendered. You haven't surrendered until the very purpose of your life is to be a vehicle through which God's mind and God's love can be expressed in this world. It's at that point that you are truly spiritually mature and awake. It's at that point that you truly want no problems. It's at that point that you know you truly want perfect happiness, because I tell you this, if your only purpose is to surrender and to be in the position of a servant so that the mind and love of God can be expressed through you, you are going to have ecstasy. You are going to have the easiest life on the planet from within yourself. That's the truth. So, the mind in perfect surrender looks out upon a world that has been healed from its own misperception that the world has had power over it. See, each sentence in the Way of Mastery, you could spend 3 or 4 hours. Like if you were to take each sentence and allow yourself to chew it and then swallow it, it would transform your life. It's not about speed. It's about remembering. It's not about analyzing. Yes, but, what about, yes, but, what about, yes, but. It's really about, I need to hear it, I need to take it in, and I need to allow myself to integrate it. And what I mean by that is, okay, the sentence in the 4th paragraph on page 231 in the Way of Mastery says, the mind in perfect surrender. How does it look? It looks out upon a world that has been healed. So when you have surrendered, which means you have made the decision that you are going to be used for the expression in the mind of God and love, you're going to look out at the world, and the world will look healed, because the world will be healed from your misperceptions. What is your misperception? Your biggest misperception is the world has power over the way you see things. The biggest mistake is that people think that the world has power over how they see things. Your biggest mistake is to think that somebody else has any power over how you see things. That's what it means when it says, heal from its own misperception that the world has had power over it. So what is the biggest misperception? Is that the world has power over the way I see things. No one, I repeat, there is not a person on the face of the earth that has power over how you perceive things. There is no one on the face of the earth that has power over how you perceive things. And the biggest misperception is that something outside of you is controlling what you believe, or that something or someone outside of you is controlling how your mind works and how you see things. It says the mind in perfect surrender. So how can I tell when I've actually truly surrendered? I can tell when I've actually truly surrendered because I won't believe that anybody else determines how I see things anymore. I won't believe that there's anything or anybody in the world that determines how I see things. I'll know that I'm the one that's totally responsible for how I see things. I will know that I'm the one that gives everything I see all the meaning that it has for me. When you have surrendered, and what does surrender mean? Surrender means that I have taken the position that I am a servant to God, which means I'm going to allow myself to be used as a conduit for the expression of the mind and the love of God. That is what surrender means. So when I really do that, and I really mean that, I'm going to use every moment of my life, every waking moment, I'm going to say, God use me. God use me. Love use me. Love use me. Love use me. God use me. Use me, God. Use me, God. Use me for your mind. Use me for your love. Use me as an expression of your mind. God, use me as an expression of your love. God, use me as an expression of your mind. God, use me as an expression of your love. When a person gets to the point that they say that and they mean that, he says, then you're going to look out at the world and you're going to be healed, and you're going to see a healed world. And a healed world is you looking out at the world without believing that you are a victim of it. Looking at the world in a healed way means that you have been healed from your own misperception that the world has had power over you. So a healed mind is a mind that doesn't believe it's a victim. A healed mind is a mind that does not believe it is a victim. A healed mind is a mind that does not believe that the world has power over it. No one has power over how I see things. No one has power over what I believe. I don't care what the world believes. I don't care what my neighbor believes. I don't care what the people around me believe. I don't care what my relatives believe. I don't care what the TV said, the newspapers say. There is nothing outside of you that has the power to determine how you believe, how you see things. And if you have really surrendered, the way of mastery is saying, if a person has really surrendered, then they can tell because they have absolutely zero victim consciousness. The healing occurs in the depth of the mind with the decision to surrender. Surrender, surrender, surrender. Surrender means to settle into the position of the servant. I am the servant. I am the servant. I am the servant. When you say that you are a servant, when you say you are a servant, you are saying that I am the conduit. I am a conduit. I am a conduit. And when you say that you are a conduit, you are saying that I am willing to be used. God, I'm willing to be used by you, God. I am willing to be used by you, God. I am willing to be used by you, God. I am willing to be used by you, God. I am willing to be used by you, God. You are willing to be used by God. You are willing to be used by God. Surrender, say, I am willing, 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 I am willing to be used by you, God. I am willing to be used by you, God. I am willing, 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 I am willing to be used by you, God. I am willing to be used by you, love. I am willing to be used by you, love. I am willing to be used by you, love. I am willing to be used by you, God. I am willing to be used by you, God. Do you know that if you have surrendered, you see that at no time, it says, a surrendered mind, it sees that at no time have you experienced anything but your own outpicturing. You are only experiencing your own outpicturing. Everything that you are experiencing right now is the outpicturing of your mind. Everything that you are experiencing right now is an outpicturing of your mind. Everything that you are experiencing right now is an outpicturing of your mind. Everything that I am experiencing right now is an outpicturing of my mind. Everything that I am experiencing right now is an outpicturing of my mind. Everything that I am experiencing right now is an outpicturing of my mind. Everything that I am experiencing right now is an outpicturing of my mind. So a mind that is surrendered is a mind that recognizes that everything it sees is an outpicturing of its mind. It says right here in paragraph 4, it sees that at no time has it experienced anything. A surrendered mind, the mind in perfect surrender, sees that at no time has it experienced anything but its own outpicturing. This is why all events are neutral. It is mind. It is your mind that interprets an event. It is your mind that is interpreting every event. It is your mind that's interpreting everything you see. It is your mind that is interpreting everything you see. It is the mind that is interpreting everything you see. Everything you feel, everything you see is an interpretation that you are making. How you see everything is your interpretation. All events are neutral. All events are neutral. There was a meeting today between the President of the United States and the ruler of North Korea. How that is a neutral event. It's your mind that's going to interpret that event. It's your mind that interprets every event. Well, I love that you are Kim, that you are interpreting me as Mr. Handsomeness. I love your correct perception. Thank you very much. It is the mind that interprets an event. It is the mind that draws a conclusion. It is the mind that then bases behavior on that conclusion. So okay, I want you to take some event that happened to you today, or any event, just any situation, any event that happened to you today. I want you to take an event that happened to you today, all right? Okay. Now, I want you to say, like I had an event. Let's see, let me think of an event. Okay. I went to a meeting today, okay? I went to a meeting today. And so according to this, that event was neutral. And it says, it is mind that interprets an event and draws a conclusion. So I interpreted that meeting, and then from my interpretation of that meeting, I'm going to draw a conclusion. And then once I draw a conclusion, I'm going to base my behavior on the conclusion that I have come to. And that conclusion that I came to about the meeting was based on my interpretation of the meeting. And it was my mind that interpreted the meeting. And out of the interpretation that I gave myself about the meeting, I came to some conclusions, and then my behavior was based on the conclusions that I came to based on the interpretations of that event. But the event was neutral. And that is what's happening all day, every day. That's what you're doing all day, every day, with every situation and every event that's going on in your life. That's the process that's going on. Your mind is interpreting that person. Your mind is interpreting that person. Then your mind draws a conclusion about that person. And then you base your behavior upon that interpretation and conclusion that you come to. That's what everyone is doing. That is what everyone is doing all day long. That's what you're doing all day long. You are just interpreting and coming to conclusions and then acting on that conclusion. You're interpreting events all day long. You're just interpreting events all day long. Then it says you're drawing a conclusion, and then you're basing your behavior upon that conclusion. That's what you do all day. That's what you do all night. That's what you do every evening. That's what you've been doing since the day you were born. Since the day you were born, you have been interpreting neutral events, drawing conclusions about the events, and then basing your behavior on the conclusion that you have come to. So suppose your interpretation is wrong. Suppose your interpretation is not true. Suppose your interpretation is not based on any true facts. And if your interpretation is based on the idea that what you are experiencing is not being caused by an outpicturing of your own mind, then you're coming to a wrong conclusion, and then your behavior will be based on that wrong conclusion, and then your behavior will be based on the idea that you are a victim. See, a victim is a person who doesn't know that all events are neutral. A victim is a person whose mind interprets the event as something that they have absolutely no connection to or control over. Then they draw that conclusion, and then they base their behavior on it. So that's right, Dana. Neutral event leads to interpreting, which leads to a conclusion, which leads to your behavior. And that's where all behavior comes from. So let's look at paragraph 5. Paragraph 5 says, the mind that is healed and rests in surrender. Notice I'm reading slowly. When you read slowly, it hooks the mind. When you read slowly, it hooks the mind and pulls the mind's attention in. So the mind that is healed and rests in surrender looks out upon an innocent world. So how can you tell that you have surrendered to God? You will be looking out and you will be saying and meaning it. Your interpretation will be, all I see is innocent. All I see is innocent people. All I see is innocent relationships. All I see is innocent things. All I hear is innocent things. All I smell is innocent things. I am only looking at innocence. So until I'm only seeing innocence and no guilt and no blame and no grievances and no projections, then I know, and that's a very good point, Lauren, when you said not there yet. I am so glad to hear you say I'm not there yet. You see, unless we can admit where we are, because we are learning, readiness is not mastery. Just because I'm ready to see everything as innocent, just because I'm ready to surrender to God, doesn't mean I've mastered surrendering to God. Just because I'm ready to be a more loving, giving, sane person, it doesn't mean I've mastered being a loving, giving, sane person. So I love it when those of you will admit that you're not there yet. I'm not there yet completely either. I'm gonna tell you. So, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. That doesn't mean that you're bad. That doesn't mean that you're some kind of failure. It actually means that you're really growing at a spiritual pace and you're growing at a spiritual level. If you're willing to say, I'm ready, but I haven't mastered it yet. And that's what I think the way of mastery in books like The Course in Miracles, they get you out of denial. They get you out of denial because it's the denial that kicks your butt. Because if you're in denial, the world is going to show you what you're in denial about. So if I admit that right now I'm not looking at everything and everybody with complete innocence, then what does that tell me? Well, it tells me I haven't surrendered yet. Okay, so what does it mean to surrender? Well, what it means to surrender is that I am going to see myself as in the position of a servant. I'm going to see myself as a conduit through which the mind and love of God can express itself. So if I'm not looking at the world in complete innocence and by the blessing of forgiveness, it just means I got some work to do. It means I still need to be open and receptive to becoming more of a servant and a conduit. It just means I need to focus more attention on being a conduit for love. That's all. That's all. It just means I need to allow myself to get rid of the blocks that keep me from being a conduit for love. And it told us, and the block is having the misperception. He says right here, having the misperception that the world has power over your mind. So the problem is I still think the world has power over my mind. I still think my ego or my fear or my illusions have power over my mind. That's the one mistake. I think I'm separate from God. So if I'm not looking at the world in total innocence, it just means I still think I'm separate from God. And if I think I'm separate from God, that just means I need to surrender. And it told me that if you were going to surrender, that just means putting yourself in the position of seeing yourself as a servant, which means you're willing to be a conduit so that the mind and love of God can be expressed through you. And you're no longer seeing yourself as a victim. And if you will do that, if you will recognize that your mind is always interpreting every event, and that you are drawing conclusions from the interpretations that you are giving yourself, and then you're basing your behavior on the interpretations that you're giving yourself. And if you really have surrendered and your mind is really healed, it says you will look out upon an innocent world that has been touched by its blessing of forgiveness. See how powerful it is when we take this slowly and let the way of mastery interpret itself for you. Notice, if you will notice what I'm doing, I'm not giving you all my opinions. Which if you have the book and you're following along with me, you will see that I'm using the material that we've studied to describe and teach the material that we've studied. Because the name of the game is you need to remember what you're reading. You need to remember what you're reading. Because if you remember what you're reading, you will remember the instructions that you're being given so that you won't deceive yourself and you won't fool yourself. You see, it says right here, the mind in the 1, 2, 3, 4. In the 5th paragraph, it says the mind that is healed and rests in surrender does what? It looks out upon an innocent world. So if I see that I'm not looking out and seeing the world as innocent, then it means that I have not surrendered yet. That's all. It just means I haven't surrendered yet. I still think I'm separate from God. Then it says, the mind that is healed and rests in surrender looks out upon an innocent world that has been touched by its blessing of forgiveness. that forgiveness is simply a step. So what is forgiveness? We always hear this term forgiveness. Forgiveness. What does it mean to forgive? Those of you who have been asking yourself, what is the true meaning of forgiveness? What is the true meaning of forgiveness? The Way of Mastery is about to give the true meaning of forgiveness, a true meaning of forgiveness. The Way of Mastery is about to give a true meaning of forgiveness. It says that forgiveness is simply a step in which that mind recognizes what? That the world it had thought was there was nothing more than its own mental creation. So whenever you forgive, you'll recognize that all you've really been looking at is your own mental creations, that you've only been looking at your own interpretations. When you forgive, you'll recognize that the only thing you've been looking at is your own interpretations, your own meanings. When you forgive, you'll recognize that you have just been responding all your life to your own interpretations, that you've been responding all your life to your own interpretations. You have been responding all your life to your own mental creations. And you smile and laugh and see. When you forgive, you will start smiling and laughing and seeing that the world has held no power over you. How can I tell when I have truly forgiven? How can I tell when I have truly forgiven? How can I tell when I have truly forgiven? How can I tell when I have truly forgiven? How can a person tell when they've truly forgiven? The way that a person can tell when they've truly forgiven is that they'll recognize that they've only been reacting to the meanings that they've been given things. I was having a startling realization when I was studying and meditating in the park the other day that 99% of the time, really 100% of the time, I've been upset with people because of the way that I've been interpreting things. And I've been upset with people because of the way that I have been interpreting their behavior. And that all of the grievances that I've had have really been my own mental creations, because I was the one that was interpreting the person, the relationship, and the event. And then, like he said, I made an interpretation, and then I turned around and I drew a conclusion about that interpretation, and then I based my behavior upon that interpretation, which in many cases was for me to get angry and hold a grievance. Like for instance, I had a big grievance against my perception of my father for a long time. And then I realized that I hadn't really been, it really wasn't my father that had really done anything to me, that I was going through all the pain that I was going through because of my interpretation of my father. And then I was drawing a conclusion about him, and then I was basing my behavior on the conclusions that I had come to about him by interpreting my events with him. And so it was my interpretation that was upsetting me, because the truth is, actually, my father never really physically hurt me in any kind of way. I was interpreting him in such a way that I drew a conclusion about him that I based my behavior on, which was me coming up with the grievance. So, regardless of what may have happened in the past, if I'm feeling bad, it's because of the story that I'm giving myself right now. In other words, I'm still giving myself an interpretation of the event, even if it happened in the past. I'm still drawing a conclusion about an event that happened with my father in the past, and then I was still basing my behavior, which was holding a grievance, based on the interpretation of an event that happened in the past. So I was really using right now to make myself feel bad. It wasn't my father that was making me feel bad right now. It was me making myself feel bad right now because of the interpretations that I was giving myself in the present moment. And the only reason why I was still giving myself interpretations of my father that upset me was because I hadn't surrendered to God. Because if I had really surrendered to God, I would simply be focusing on, instead of focusing on what I think my father did to me, instead of focusing on what I thought my father did to me, what I really would be doing is focusing on being in the position of the servant. I would be focusing on being a conduit through which God's love could be expressed. And that would be what I would be focusing in on every single moment. So I really wouldn't have time to think about what it was I thought my father did to me in the past that I was making myself feel bad about. So I hadn't fully surrendered, because if I had fully surrendered, I would be focusing on being a conduit for the mind of God and a conduit for the mind of love, instead of focusing in on instead of focusing in on what I thought somebody did to me in the past that was making me feel upset. So there, Earl. And it says, I'll say it again. It says that forgiveness is simply a step in which that mind recognizes that the world it had thought was there was nothing more than its own mental creation, and smiles and laughs and sees that the world has held no power. I'm on page 231. And that all events, did it say all events? It says all events that have arisen, all interpretation of events, all interpretation of events have been generated from within the kingdom of the mind, which is the one place, the mind, the one place, the mind, that it is given unto you with your mind to assume responsibility for your own domain. So, what is it that we need to be doing? We need to be assuming responsibility for what we need to be assuming responsibility for how we interpret events. You need to assume responsibility for how you are interpreting the events in your life, because the way you are interpreting the events in your life are causing you to draw and come to certain conclusions. And when you come to those conclusions, you base your behavior on those conclusions. And if you are misperceiving, and misperceiving means that you're looking at it as if the world outside of you or the person outside of you had control over how you think and feel, then that's your misperception. And then you're going to come to some conclusions based on that misperception that you are a victim. And then your behavior is going to be based on the idea that you are a victim, and you are going to suffer, and you are going to go through pain. And that's where all pain comes from. It comes from believing that you are separate from God. It comes from believing that you're separate from love. It comes from believing that you don't have power, and that how you think and how you feel is not under your control and decision. So it's important to recognize that the most important thing that you can do with your mind is to place your mind at the disposal of true authority. And placing your mind at the disposal of true authority means to place your mind at the disposal of God. And what do? You say, God, I settled into the position of your servant. I am the conduit. I'm willing to be the conduit. I'm willing to be the conduit through which the mind of God and the love of God can be expressed. That is what surrender means. And that's going to be my one purpose. That's how I'm going to use my time. That's what I'm going to focus on. There's no other purpose in my life other than to be a conduit and a channel for the wisdom and the love of God to come through. And I'm going to surrender, which means that my mind is finally healed from its own misperception that the world has power over my mind. I'm letting go of the idea that the world or anybody else has power over how I see things, because I'm going to accept that all events are neutral. And if some of you have a real challenge saying the word God, I would invite you to practice saying the word God. One of the easiest ways to get past something that you resist is to understand that what? Well, it's just what it's saying right here. The word God is neutral, but you're interpreting the word God. And from your interpretation of the word God, you're drawing conclusions about the word God. And then you're basing your behavior about the word God based on your interpretation. God is a neutral word. God is a neutral word. If you say the word God and it makes you feel discomfort, you're giving the word God an interpretation that's making you feel uncomfortable with the word God. It's not the word God that's causing your discomfort. It's your interpretation of the word God based on something that you experienced in the past, and it's causing you to draw a conclusion that you can't say the word God, and then you have a behavior that can't say the word God. That is why you feel anything that you feel about anything, is because you are giving it all the meaning that it has, and then you're responding to the meaning that you've given it, which means that you have not surrendered. Because if you had surrendered, you wouldn't be focusing on your resistance to the word God. What you would be focusing on is settling into the position of the servant, which means you would be concentrating on being a conduit through which the mind and love of God could be expressed. You would be too busy being a channel for love to be getting upset about the interpretation that you're giving to a word called God. Wow. Take a breath. All right. Forgiveness is the key to happiness. So what is forgiveness? Recognizing that everything that I'm looking at is my own mental creation. Everything that I'm looking at is my own mental creation. Everything that I'm looking at is my own mental creation. Everything that I am responsible for how I see. 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 I am responsible for how I see things. I am responsible for how I see. I am responsible for how I see things. I am responsible for how I see. I am responsible for how I see things. I am responsible for how I see. 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 You are responsible for how you 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 see. I am responsible for how I see. I am responsible for how I see. You are responsible for how you see. You are responsible for how you see. You are responsible for how you see things. You are responsible for how you see. You are responsible for how you see things. You are responsible for how you see. You are responsible for how you see things. You are responsible for how you see. You are responsible for how you see things. You are responsible for how you see. I am responsible for how I see things. I am responsible for how I see. I am responsible for how I see things. I am responsible for how I see things. I am responsible for how I see. I am responsible for how I see. I am responsible for how I see things. I am responsible for how I see things. You are responsible for how you see things. You are responsible for how you see. You are responsible for how you see things. You are responsible for how you see. You are responsible for how you see, which means you are responsible for how you feel. You are responsible for how you feel. All events are neutral. Your mind is interpreting everything. And from your interpretation of everything, you are coming to certain conclusions. And from those conclusions that you come to, you are basing your behavior on those conclusions. And that's why you are experiencing the life you are experiencing. You are experiencing the life of your interpretations. You are experiencing a life that's based 100% on your interpretations. And when you forgive, you recognize that it is only your interpretations that has determined how you've been feeling all your life. It's your interpretations. So the mind that has been healed of illusion has been healed of all illusions. The mind has been healed of illusions, has been healed of all illusions. Mighty companions, I'm going to do a quick recap of what we have covered so far, because it's really about us hearing it and knowing really what is the source of all our illusions and all of our fears. I want to thank you for your support. I want to thank you for tuning in to my broadcast and sharing them. I'm here to be a conduit. I'm here to be a servant. And this is what I do in the world. I would truly appreciate it from the bottom of my heart If you feel led to make a financial expression of appreciation, thank you for making a financial expression of appreciation toward my full-time ministry. If you like to do that, go to www.earlpurdy, Purdy.com, earlpurdy.com. I'm available to work with you on a one-on-one, to show you how to apply this in your everyday experience and make it really practical in dealing with some situation or circumstance that you have going on in your life that you're ready to have more peace about. I call them clarity sessions. And I use all of this knowledge and wisdom, as well as my 40 years as an astrologer and a numerologist, for getting additional information that's available for those who are open-minded enough to take advantage of it. And if you go to my website, earlpurdy.com, then it will explain my clarity sessions in detail. You want to make sure that you're on my contact list, because I'm going to be doing a hardcore Course in Miracles workshop soon. And also, I have my next presentation at 7 p.m. every Thursday, Mountain Time. And on Thursdays, it's called Hardcore Course in Miracles. Hardcore Course in Miracles. And on Sundays at 1 p.m. Mountain Time, I do a Course in Miracles. And that's at 1 p.m. Mountain Time, and you don't have to be a Facebook member to watch it on Facebook Live. You just go to www.facebook.com/Earl Purdy Live. That's where you see my live broadcast, and they also repost it. And please share my broadcast. Those of you who believe in my ministry and support the ministry of God through me, I need your help. I need you to spread these videos, share these videos, follow this page. Let's build up a really powerful soul family together. So Tuesday nights, Way of Mastery, 7 p.m. Mountain Time every Tuesday, right here with my mighty companions. Don't forget, it's at www.facebook.com/Earl Purdy. I love you all. Okay, so let's do a quick review. And let me tell you, you all really need to understand, I love how you all are connecting and joining and communicating and commenting and sharing. It's awesome that we are coming together and that we value these times together. I love you. I love all of you. Here we go. Now, what was it that we were told? We were told that there's just one cause. There's just one cause for every single problem that we think we have. There is one single problem for everything you think you have. And that problem is believing that you are separate from God. That's a lie. You are not separate from God. But the one problem is that you believe you are separate from God. Let go of that idea and all your problems will vanish. There's only one problem and one solution. The one problem is, I think I am separate from God. The one solution is surrender. If you surrender, you will be happy if you surrender. What does it mean to surrender? Let me tell you what it means. Surrender means I'm going to settle into the position of the servant. It's time for you to settle in the position of the servant. What does it mean to be a servant of God? What does it mean to be God's servant? What does it mean to be love's servant? What does it mean to be God's servant? It means I'm willing to be a conduit. I'm willing to be God's conduit. I'm willing to be God's conduit. I'm willing to be God's conduit. I'm going to surrender. I'm going to be a conduit through which the mind of God, the love of God can be expressed. I'm willing to let God express God through me. 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 Your mind, if it's in surrender, it has gotten rid of the idea that anybody has power over what you think. If you are really waking up, you let go of the idea that no one has power over what I think. No one has power over what you think. No one has power over what I think. No one has power over what you think. All events are neutral. All events are neutral. All events are neutral. What does that mean? Your mind interprets an event. Your mind interprets an event. And then your mind draws a conclusion. Your mind is drawing conclusions. Your mind is drawing conclusions. And then you are basing your behavior on your conclusions. You are basing your behavior on your conclusions. You are basing your behavior on your conclusions. I am basing my behavior on my conclusions. Say it. I am basing my behavior on my conclusions. I am basing my behavior on my conclusions. You are basing your behavior on your conclusions. You are not separate from God. You are not separate from God. You are not separate from God. You are not separate from God, mighty companions. Listen to this over and over and over and over again. It will transform your experience. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Dana, for making people aware of my clarity sessions and sharing your thoughts about them in the comments. Thank you, CJ, for also supporting and narrating when you can. Thank you, mighty companions, for being the hearts and souls of the connection to God for each other. We love each other. This is what love is. I love you. I'm interpreting you as juicy and sweet. So I'm drawing the conclusion that you are juicy and sweet. And I'm going to behave like you are a juicy and sweet. This is Raj. This is Earl. I love you. See you next time.